He wasn't looking for secrets that morning, just peace. A quiet walk with his old dog, Buddy, along a misty trail in Silver Hollow. But then, Buddy stopped, ears up, body tense, staring at something half hidden in the weeds. A rusted mailbox wrapped in vines, as if the forest itself was guarding it. Inside, a burned piece of paper, words barely clinging to life. Don't let them bury the truth with me. What truth? Who wrote it? And why had it waited 30 years to be found? That discovery would awaken a town, expose a forgotten betrayal, and prove that sometimes the smallest letter can change the biggest hearts. Before we begin, where are you watching from tonight? Drop your city in the comments and hit subscribe, because this story might just restore your faith in people. Morning rose thin and silver over the hills of Silver Hollow. Mist drifted among the pines, catching light like breath over glass. The air smelled of wet bark and the quiet sweetness that follows night rain. Sam Walker walked that quiet as if testing a bridge. Mid-40s, broad-shouldered but lean, he wore a beige work jacket faded soft at the seams, charcoal chinos, and worn brown boots. His short chestnut hair showed early silver at the temples. A light beard lined a face carved by duty and sleeplessness. Once a combat medic, Sam had learned to move fast through chaos. Now, each step was deliberate, calm, counting breath instead of orders. Peace was his new field manual, though the body didn't always read it. Beside him trotted Buddy, a 6-year-old German shepherd, black-saddled and amber-eyed, fur glinting damp in the dawn. Powerful but gentle, he moved with the grace of something both guardian and friend. His ears caught sounds before Sam noticed them. His gaze, steady and waiting, seemed to hold an old knowing. No vest, no badge, just the quiet pride of a loyal soul. Sam carried a canvas tool bag and the day's simple mission: repair a fence for Ruth Whitmore, a widow whose cottage sat where the paved road surrendered to forest. The job had come through Amy Lee, the woman who ran Silver Hollow's small postal center. Amy had once served as an army nurse. Now she commanded shelves of envelopes instead of patients, though she treated both with equal precision. Tall, with olive skin and dark hair streaked white near one temple, she had the poise of someone who could calm a storm simply by standing still. In her office, she moved easily among paper stacks, radiating the order that once held hospital wards together. To veterans like Sam, that steadiness was medicine. "Take Buddy," Amy had said that morning, eyes warm behind wire-rimmed glasses. "He listens better than most supervisors. Besides, you two need the air." Sam had smiled. "I like to be trusted." Amy had poured tea into a small thermos and handed it across the counter. "Then earn it." The trail curled through dripping ferns and whispering needles. Sam let his shoulders roll once. Habit, easing tension before it spoke too loudly. He could feel peace like a tentative guest hovering at his back. Then Buddy stopped. The dog's ears rose, body tightening to a question. His tail froze at a careful angle. The small world around them seemed to lean in. Sam followed his gaze to a shape almost swallowed by vines. Something tilted and rusted at the base of an elm. It was an old mailbox. The flag hung half-rotted, its paint gone to rust. Moss wrapped the post like a patient bandage. The forest had been keeping it. Sam crouched, laying down his bag. The medic in him, still alive beneath the years, inspected without hurry, burns scoring along the rim. Hinge half melted, faint scent of smoke layered beneath earth. He lifted the lid, its side open. Inside lay a single, folded paper, edges blackened, middle browned to the color of tobacco leaf. The writing trembled but held. "If anyone finds this, don't let them bury the truth with me." R. Miller, Postal Service, 1989. The air around him thickened. 36 words, that was all, and yet they reached out like a hand through time. Truth Anne Barry. 2 words Sam understood too well. He read it twice, then a third time, letting its weight settle. Buddy pressed one paw onto his boot, sensing the change. Sam tucked the letter carefully into his jacket pocket, between the thermos and the pulse he still had. By the time he reached Ruth Whitmore's porch, sunlight had cleared the lower fog. The widow stood waiting with a basket of nails and that ageless patience people earn from loneliness. Short, sturdy silver hair in a tidy braid, eyes sharp with humor. Ruth carried herself like the hill she lived on, weathered, unyielding, kind only to those who worked. "Fences back there," she called. "Mind the nettles, and let that handsome dog of yours roam. He looks smarter than most men I've hired." Sam smiled and went to work. He measured twice, hammered once. The rhythm steadied him. Buddy lay nearby, chin on paws, tail flicking whenever the hammer paused. When it was done, the fence stood straighter than before. Ruth brought lemonade, mostly cold tap water with one stubborn slice of lemon, and said, "You fix things like you're afraid they'll remember being broken." He nearly told her about the letter, but held it back. Secrets he'd learned needed context before witnesses. She handed him a jar of jam as payment and declared, "Come back next week, the porch railing's plotting against me." He promised he would, and she waved them off like family already claimed. The return path felt different. Every sound seemed translated, leaves whispering questions, creek echoing names. The folded paper in his pocket warmed with body heat, its silence heavier than words. Sam thought about R. Miller, the neat period after the initial, the year inked like a gravestone number. Postal Service, 1989. That was before automation, before Amy, before most people stopped writing letters by hand. A vanished time. Yet its echo had chosen today. The postal center sat near the square, a brick building with fading murals of mail carriers in blue. Inside, the air smelled of coffee, paper dust, and a hint of lemon cleaner. Amy looked up from sorting invoices, reading glasses balanced low on her nose. "Fence fixed?" "Standing proud," Sam said, setting the thermos down. "And you?" He unfolded the letter and placed it on the counter. Amy's expression shifted as she read, from alert to concerned to quietly reverent. "R. Miller," she murmured. "That name's on an old roster I digitized once. Vanished during a storm run in '89. The truck was never recovered." Sam waited. She glanced up, dark eyes thoughtful. "You found—" "This where?" "In the woods, North Trail. Buddy led me." She nodded slowly, as if the answer fit some map she hadn't drawn yet. "You realize what this implies?" "I realize it felt like someone asking for help," Sam said. Amy folded the paper into a plastic sleeve. "We'll go there tomorrow. Bring a camera, not a shovel." He almost smiled. "You sound like command again." "Habit," she said. "Procedure is safer than panic." The phone rang. Old corded unit, bell shrill against the hush. Amy answered with her usual calm. A pause. Then her tone cooled. "Yes, Mr. Harlan, I understand. We always follow regulation." Another pause. "No, we won't disturb potential evidence." She hung up slowly. "Harlan," Sam said, recognizing the name like an old echo. Reed Harlan, former police chief, still the loudest voice at council meetings, a man built like oak furniture and just as unwilling to bend. His reputation carried both respect and unease. Amy confirmed it with a quiet nod. "He heard we might have found something, suggested we keep hands off until he can review it." "Review or bury?" Sam asked. She gave him a thin smile. "Same spelling, different intent." She slid the letter into a folder marked Temp Hold, private, and sealed it. "We'll document properly, chain of custody, photos, all of it. If there's truth here, it deserves daylight, not rumor." Buddy shifted beside Sam, tail sweeping once across the floorboards. Outside, rain began again, gentle and precise. Amy turned the sign on the door to closed, but didn't dim the lights. "Whatever this is, Sam, we handle it right. No shortcuts." He nodded. "Right's the only way it stays fixed." They stood there a moment longer, the ex-medic, the ex-nurse, the dog listening to the rain, as if the room itself understood that something buried was about to breathe again. Night in Silver Hollow glowed faintly, as if the mist had learned to keep a small flame alive. In Sam Walker's rented room, above the post office garage, the clock ticked too loudly. He sat by a small desk under a dim lamp. The burned letter open again, edges curled like dried petals. He had read it a dozen times, tracing the name R. Miller. The signature tugged at memory. A line in a supply log, maybe a face from an old photo. Somewhere during his medic years, he had seen that name, or one close enough to stir unease. He remembered the sand, the rotor noise, the way help sometimes never arrived because the boxes never did. That failure still lived inside his pulse. Buddy lay under the desk, tail twitching in dreams. The dog gave a soft whine, and Sam reached down to rest a hand on his back, feeling the steady rise and fall. "We were supposed to save people," he murmured, not sure whether he meant then or now. Sleep never came. Before dawn, Sam brewed metallic coffee and looked out at a town blurred by fog. Across the street, the post office lights were already on. Amy Lee was always early. Inside, Amy was sorting mail, her dark hair tied back, that calm smile waiting. "Couldn't sleep either?" she asked. "The letter," he said simply. "I checked the old rosters," she replied, pushing up her glasses. "Robert Miller, postal driver, Route 9A, missing since winter 1989. They called it an accident. Flood swept him off the Ridge Road." She opened a thin folder and slid a photocopy across the desk. A man with sandy hair, a crooked grin beside a white postal truck. They never found either. Sam studied the photo. The man looked proud of the uniform, the kind of worker who believed in doing things right. He couldn't have known that decades later, a stranger would find his last words. Amy set down her coffee. "We're going back, aren't we?" He nodded. "We owe him that much." The drive to the ridge was short, a patch of cracked asphalt winding between hills washed clean by rain. Amy drove, steady as always. Buddy sat between them, nose to the breeze, reading the wind. At the forest turnoff, they parked and continued on foot. The air smelled of pine and cold soil. When they reached the old mailbox, it looked even more fragile in daylight, half consumed by vines, the post leaning like a weary limb. Sam crouched, brushing dew away, while Amy took careful photographs. "This wasn't random," Sam said. "Someone wanted it hidden, but found someday." Amy pointed at the ground. "See here? The soil's darker, maybe from weight. Could have been a tire mark." Buddy nosed near a fallen log, pawing once. Metal glinted beneath the mulch, a curved piece of white-painted steel. Amy crouched, eyes narrowing. "Postal paint," she said. Sam turned it over. So it didn't wash away. It was buried. They mapped the site with small orange flags Amy had brought. She documented every angle, labeling, shots with dates and coordinates. Her calm precision reminded Sam of field triage, control born from chaos. By late morning, they returned to the truck. Amy uploaded the photos to her tablet. "I'll file this quietly. Less noise, more fact." "Quiet won't last," Sam said. "No, but truth deserves a head start," she answered. Back at the post office, the lobby hummed with routine until a shadow filled the doorway. George Talbot, the regional postal inspector, tall and broad-shouldered, early 60s, stepped in. His gray hair was neatly cropped, his uniform pressed sharp as habit. A man of few expressions, he carried the air of someone who had spent his life obeying the rules because the rules had once saved him. "Morning, Amy," he said, voice gravel warm. "Heard from Harlan there's been a find. Mind explaining?" Amy gestured toward her office. Inside, George removed his cap and sat stiff-backed. Evidence of a missing employee? Amy handed him the report and photos. Documented, untouched. He scanned quickly. This could turn federal. Sam spoke evenly. We're aware. That's why we followed procedure. George studied him. Walker, right? Medic. Your record's clean. Sam inclined his head. Praise never lingered long with him. George continued. Harlan's pressing to secure the site, but it's postal ground, not police. If he pushes, I'll take it up the line. Amy smiled thinly. He's not used to hearing no. George rose, slipping the folder under his arm. Keep it quiet. Truth first, talk later. When he left, Amy exhaled. He's the kind who still believes the system can work, on good days. Then we better give him one, Sam replied. The afternoon moved slow. Buddy dozed by the heater while Sam fixed a loose hinge. Amy typed her notes, sunlight striping the room through half-open blinds. By 5, the report was filed, time-stamped, and stored. If anything happens, she said, this proves we did it right. Sam nodded, folding the copy into his jacket. Tomorrow, we'll see what else the forest remembers. That evening, he walked Buddy through the quiet square. Children rode bikes, an old man swept his porch. The diner's neon hummed faintly. Yet beneath it all, Sam felt the town listening, like something beneath the soil was waiting for permission to speak. They stopped by the war memorial, the bronze soldier frozen mid-step. Sam rested his hand on the stone base. 30 years is a long time to wait for truth. Buddy sat beside him, tail brushing pavement, eyes steady on the fading light. Across the street, the post office window glowed. Amy was still inside, working late, keeping the day's story from closing. The night wind lifted, cool and full of pine. Sam breathed it in, thinking of the man named Miller, and how some letters, no matter how lost, always find their way home. The next morning dawned brighter than it had in weeks. Sunlight spilled through the pines, slicing the fog into thin, ghostly ribbons. The air was cool, heavy with the scent of cedar and damp earth. Sam Walker stepped out of his small apartment behind the post office with Buddy trotting at his side, their shadows long and pale against the gravel. His body moved with the precision of habit. Check the satchel, whistle for the dog, take the old trail north. But beneath the rhythm, there was a tension, a sense of unfinished business that had rooted itself deep in his chest since the day they found the letter. Amy Lee was already waiting by her truck, her sleeves rolled up, a map spread across the hood. Her dark hair caught the morning light, silver glinting near her temple. She wore the same calm that steadied Sam, though her eyes betrayed the same restlessness that had haunted him all night. "Ready?" she asked. He nodded. "As ready as we'll ever be." They drove until the road gave way to uneven dirt, where tree roots had broken through like ribs under thin skin. Buddy rode in the back, nose pressed to the open window, tail twitching at every new scent. When they reached the ridge, Sam noticed how the forest seemed quieter here, less wind, more listening. The same trail where they'd found the mailbox wound deeper into the trees, its edges soft with moss and old needles. Amy parked, killed the engine, and opened the tailgate. "He knows the place," she said. Sam smiled faintly. "He always does." Buddy jumped down, circled once, and started along the path. His paws moved with purpose, nose close to the ground, tail rigid. The morning sun had begun to pierce through the canopy, creating shifting mosaics of gold and green. Sam followed a few steps behind, the medic in him noting every indentation, every unnatural alignment of stone and soil. Years in the field had trained his senses to read landscapes the way others read faces. Something about the ground here felt wrong, too soft, too consistent, as if nature had been coached to forget. He stopped suddenly. "Amy, look here," he said, crouching. The moss beneath his boots sloped slightly inward, forming a shallow depression. In the dappled light, He could see faint streaks of rust and an almost invisible glint, something metallic just below the surface. Buddy pawed at the edge, then looked up, whining low. Amy knelt beside him, her voice calm but focused. Could be old fencing, maybe a tool shed collapsed. Sam shook his head. No, too uniform. See the angle here? That's not fallen, it's parked. He brushed aside a thick patch of moss, revealing a thin sheet of glass coated in grime. When he wiped it with his sleeve, sunlight flashed off it. Windshield, he whispered. Amy leaned closer, her breath catching. Oh my God! They cleared more moss and vines, working slowly, hands steady, eyes fixed on the growing outline. The shape emerged inch by inch, a roof, rounded corners, a door handle, a faint trace of white paint beneath layers of green. It was as though time itself had built a disguise over what had once been bright and moving. It's the truck, Sam said quietly. R. Miller's. The forest seemed to hold its breath. Even Buddy stilled, his amber eyes reflecting the pale gleam of metal. Amy pressed a hand to her mouth, her voice trembling between disbelief and awe. 30 years. They stood in silence for a moment before Sam gently tried the handle. It groaned but gave way. A puff of stale, earthy air escaped, smelling of paper, mold, and something older. Inside, dim light filtered through a shattered side window, illuminating a scene both preserved and ruined. The driver's seat was torn but intact. The dashboard, though corroded, still bore a faded postal emblem. On the passenger side lay several canvas mailbags, their seals unbroken, the wax stamped with the federal crest of 1989. And hanging from the glove compartment latch, half buried in dust, was a tarnished brass nameplate, R. Miller. Amy's eyes filled. He never made it out, she whispered. Sam crouched, brushing off a thin film of dirt from the nameplate. Or maybe he wasn't supposed to. He reached carefully into the nearest mailbag, lifting one of the envelopes. The ink was blurred, but the address was legible. Silver Hollow Council Office. Another was labeled Postal District, Internal Review. Many bore identical dates, February 1989. Amy's brows knit as she examined them. These weren't personal deliveries, they were official. Sam nodded, and they never arrived. He moved toward the back, shining a small flashlight. The rear door was dented inward, suggesting impact from the outside, not within. The tracks leading here had been long since swallowed by nature, but the evidence remained. Someone had gone through the trouble of hiding this vehicle completely. Amy backed out, her hands trembling slightly despite her composure. This wasn't an accident. Someone wanted him gone. Buddy barked once, sharp and alert. He had moved to the opposite side of the clearing, sniffing around a patch of disturbed soil. Sam walked over, kneeling where the dog stood. The ground there was lighter, the moss thinner, as if it had been turned and recovered. Sam dug gently with his hands until he found a piece of torn fabric, navy blue, edged with faded gold stitching. It looked like the corner of a uniform. He held it up to the light. Amy stared at it, then at the truck. He was taken from here. Sam nodded grimly. Or brought back. The words hung in the air like the echo of something forbidden. They stayed another hour documenting everything. Amy photographed the mailbags, the interior, the uniform scrap. Sam marked coordinates, careful not to disturb more than necessary. The silence around them grew thick, as if the forest didn't want witnesses. When they finally stepped back, Sam closed the door gently, as though sealing a tomb. "We'll let Talbot see this first," he said. Amy agreed, her expression set but distant. "And if Harlan finds out?" Sam met her eyes. "He already knows something. That's why he's nervous." As they walked back toward the truck, the forest light shifted, warmer now, the day older. Sam could feel the weight of what they had uncovered pressing against the edges of his calm. He had spent years patching wounds he couldn't see, but this was different. This was a wound that belonged to a place, not a man. At the ridge, Amy stopped to take one last photo. The lens caught the reflection of the truck door beneath the moss, a faint gleam of brass catching sunlight. The name R. Miller shining through years of decay. That night, Amy filed a confidential report with the district office, marking it Priority Human Remains Possible. Sam sat nearby, silent, Buddy resting his head on his knee. Outside, the town lights blinked like slow, tired eyes. Amy looked up from the screen. Once this goes out, there's no undoing it. Sam's voice was low but certain. Good. Some truths should never stay buried. She nodded, clicking send. The sound was small, almost delicate, but it carried the weight of 30 years. The following morning, the forest was no longer theirs. By the time Sam Walker and Amy Lee arrived, the ridge was cordoned off with yellow tape, and men in dark uniforms milled about under the pines. The air felt heavier than before, tainted not with rot or age, but with bureaucracy. Sam's jaw tightened as he spotted Harlan Reeves, the retired police chief turned self-appointed overseer of anything that stirred in Silver Hollow. Harlan was in his late 60s, broad-shouldered but stooped, his gray hair slicked back and his eyes small, restless, like an old crow guarding a field that wasn't his. His uniform no longer fit, yet he wore it anyway, the badge dull but visible. He turned as Amy approached, his tone clipped. Miss Lee, Mr. Walker, you two stirred up quite a mess. Amy kept her voice polite but firm. We followed protocol, Chief Reeves. The discovery was logged and reported to the postal district as required. Protocol, he repeated, smirking. Well, I'm restoring some of the old ways here. You'll both sign these non-disclosure agreements. This site is now under county review. He gestured to a deputy holding a clipboard. The young man behind him looked uncomfortable, barely out of training, face pale, eyes darting between his boss and the two civilians before him. Sam folded his arms, silent, assessing. Harlan turned his attention to him. You of all people should understand, soldier. Some things are best left buried. Sam's voice was low. And some things deserve daylight. The silence that followed was brittle. Amy placed a hand gently on Sam's arm, grounding him. We'll cooperate, Chief. You'll have our signatures. Satisfied, Harlan handed over the papers, his expression smug. Good. This town doesn't need another scandal, not after what happened in '89. Amy met his gaze evenly. Maybe that's exactly why it does. Harlan's smile vanished, replaced by the thin-lipped expression of a man used to being feared, not challenged. Watch yourself, Miss Lee. Curiosity has a way of killing more than cats. They signed because refusing would only raise suspicion. As they left, Sam noticed the subtle gesture Amy made. Her phone, still in her pocket, had been recording the entire exchange. Back at the post office, Amy closed her office door and exhaled. He's scared, she said. Scared people hide behind rules. Sam nodded, pacing. He's not protecting the town. He's protecting himself, or someone who still matters. They sat together, piecing through the photos, maps, and files they'd gathered before the site was locked down. Amy organized everything into folders labeled Evidence A through D. Her movements were steady, but the tension in her jaw betrayed her anger. We can't send this through local channels, she said. It'll vanish before it hits a desk. Then we go higher, Sam replied. Amy looked up. How high? He tapped the burned letter still pinned to the evidence board. Federal, Office of the Inspector General, maybe the state representative's office too. Amy hesitated, the weight of the choice clear on her face. You know what this means. If we're wrong... Sam's tone was quiet, resolute. We're not. Buddy, lying near the heater, perked his ears at Sam's voice. The German shepherd, 5 years old, coat a blend of sable and black, eyes amber and intelligent, stood, stretching. Amy smiled faintly. He always knows when you're about to do something reckless. Not reckless, Sam said, patting the dog's side. Just overdue. They spent the rest of the morning scanning documents, duplicating files, and compressing photo evidence. Amy's fingers flew over the keyboard, her concentration absolute. Occasionally, she would pause to check that the upload to the federal secure portal hadn't failed. Each folder was mirrored onto an encrypted drive, which Sam slipped into a small, weatherproof pouch. "This one," Amy said, handing him the pouch, "goes with Buddy." Sam raised a brow. "You're trusting him with classified mail?" Amy grinned faintly. "He's the only one Harlan won't suspect, and besides, it feels right." Sam crouched, fastening the small pouch to the harness Buddy wore on special deliveries. A tan canvas vest with 2 side pockets, worn smooth from years of use. Inside the pouch was the Byrne Letters replica, the digital drive, and a short note addressed to Federal Postal Inspector Office, confidential. He looked into Buddy's eyes, serious but gentle. "Guard it with your life, boy." Buddy tilted his head and barked once as if understanding. When the upload finished, Amy leaned back, rubbing her temples. "That's one copy to OIG. The second goes to the state representative's office. I'll print the cover letter tonight and mail it first thing tomorrow." Sam frowned. "Mailing it through this branch isn't safe. Someone's watching." She nodded. "Then we'll take it to another town. I know a retired clerk in Ridge County, Sarah Douglas. She runs a small independent drop station near the river. Nobody checks her bins anymore." Sarah Douglas turned out to be a stout woman in her early 70s, with sun-browned skin, gray curls tucked beneath a postal cap, and a laugh that rasped like gravel. When they met her that afternoon, she was sweeping the porch of her tiny post outpost, a single-room cabin with a rusted metal box nailed to the door. "Well, if it isn't little Amy Lee," she said, eyes twinkling. "And who's this tall drink of water?" "Sam Walker," Amy said. "We could use your help, Sarah." Sarah squinted at them, then at Buddy, who was sitting politely by the step. You've got the look of people about to stir a pot that's been cold too long. I suppose I should be honored." Amy smiled. "We just need to send a few letters without questions." Sarah leaned her broom against the wall. "Honey, I built a career not asking questions. Leave them with me. I'll see they reach the right hands." Sam handed over the sealed envelopes, each marked with coded initials. "These contain sensitive reports. If anything happens—" Sarah cut him off with a chuckle. "If anything happens, I'll tell everyone the raccoons took 'em. Now get out before someone wonders why I'm suddenly popular." Back on the road, Amy looked out the window, her voice soft. She lost her husband in that flood of '89. His name was on the council supply list. Sam gripped the wheel. Then maybe she's waited for this too. They drove in silence for a while. The sun began to dip behind the hills, painting the trees copper. Buddy lay quietly in the back, head resting on his paws, the pouch still attached to his harness like a symbol of purpose reborn. When they returned to town, they found Harlan's car parked near Amy's house. His figure loomed by the porch, speaking with someone in plain clothes, a man in a gray suit, trim and expressionless. Sam's instincts prickled. The man's stance was too sharp for a local, his shoes too clean for mud roads. He gave a brief nod to Harlan, then got into his car and drove off. Amy's brows furrowed. "He's bringing in outsiders now." Sam said quietly, "Good. It means we're hitting nerves." That night, Amy worked late at her desk, finalizing the logs. Sam stayed to help, feeding papers through the scanner, both too tired to speak much. The quiet hum of the machine filled the room until Amy suddenly said, "Do you ever think Miller knew this would happen? That his letter would find its way out, no matter how long it took?" Sam looked at the Byrne note still pinned on the board. Maybe he hoped someone would read it. Maybe he just wanted to be heard one last time. Buddy stirred, rising to his feet. He padded over to Sam, resting his head against his knee. Sam smiled faintly. "Guess the mail's finally moving again, huh?" Amy chuckled softly, then grew serious. "Whatever happens next, we keep our promise to the man who wrote that note." Sam nodded. "And to the people who still believe in letters that arrive late, but always on time." Buddy barked once in agreement, tail wagging gently. Outside, the wind brushed through the pine trees, carrying the faint rustle of leaves that sounded almost like pages turning. A quiet reminder that stories, even forgotten ones, have their way of finding readers. By the time the federal agents arrived in Silver Hollow, the story had already grown beyond their reach. It began as whispers. Someone saw Amy Lee's truck parked late by the ridge. Someone else mentioned Sam Walker carrying sealed envelopes at the diner. In small towns, secrets travel faster than mail. Within days, everyone had heard. The old postal truck of Robert Miller had been found under the moss, with letters still sealed inside. At first, most dismissed it as folklore revived by gossip. But then, Reverend Thomas Bell, pastor of the town's modest wooden church, confirmed that Amy had asked him to bless the recovered mail before it was sent to archives. That act alone turned curiosity into belief. Reverend Bell was a tall, gentle man in his 50s, with thinning blonde hair and hands that always seemed stained with oil from the church's ancient bell mechanism. He had a soft voice that carried far, the kind that could turn rebuke into comfort. When he spoke about forgiveness, people listened, not because they feared God, but because they trusted him. One evening, he visited the post office, where Amy was sorting through dozens of messages from journalists and townsfolk. "I heard the letters are being returned," he said quietly. "Would you allow me to hold a reading at the church? People might need closure." Amy looked up, exhausted yet resolute. "These were never meant to disappear, Reverend. If hearing them helps the town remember, then yes, let's do it." Word spread fast. By the following Sunday, the church pews were full. Elderly couples, war veterans, young parents with children perched on their laps. Each had come carrying a curiosity that felt half sacred, half guilty. Sam sat in the back beside Buddy, who lay calmly under the bench, his fur catching the colored light from the stained glass windows. The air smelled faintly of polish and candle wax. Reverend Bell began with a prayer, brief and grounded. "Lord," he said, "may every word once lost find its way to the hearts that needed it most." Then he opened the first letter, yellowed and fragile. It was addressed to Mrs. Annette Weller, Maple Street. The voice that filled the church was not his own. It was the voice of the past, trembling through him. "My dear Annette, the shipment's been delayed again. I'll be home before spring. Keep the porch light burning." Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd. Annette Weller herself, now nearly 80, was there in the front pew. Tears ran freely down her cheeks. "That was my Harold," she whispered. "He never made it home that spring." Amy exchanged a glance with Sam. Every letter Reverend Bell read seemed to stitch a missing piece of the town's history back into place. A note from a soldier to his mother. A notice of insurance approval long forgotten. A wedding invitation dated March 1989. All ghosts of ordinary lives interrupted by someone else's silence. After the readings, people came forward to light candles. The church glowed with small flickers, each flame a story rekindled. Sam stood quietly, watching as an old mechanic embraced a woman he hadn't spoken to in decades, apologizing for words lost in the years between. Outside, under the porch lights, conversations turned from grief to gratitude. "They tried to bury truth," one man said, "but truth grows roots." Meanwhile, Harlan Reeves was losing his grip on the narrative. He stormed into the town hall the next morning, red-faced, waving an official notice. "Unauthorized possession of federal mail," he shouted. "This is tampering." But the town clerk, Janice Porter, a small, sharp-eyed woman in her 60s with silver hair tied in a precise bun, refused to be intimidated. Janice had spent her life in this building. Her husband had been a mail carrier once, too. She looked Harlan dead in the eye. "You've kept this town in fear long enough, Chief Reeves. If anyone's guilty of tampering, it's whoever buried that truck in the first place." Harlan froze, momentarily disarmed by the quiet authority in her voice. Around them, several council members nodded in agreement. One of them, a young schoolteacher named Martha Green, rose and said, "We've decided to start a petition. The van should stay where it was found, not hidden again, but preserved." By noon, the petition had signatures from nearly every household in Silver Hollow. Farmers came down from the ridge. Mechanics signed on their lunch breaks. Even the local high school art class volunteered to paint a mural near the ridge road, depicting the lost letters flying like birds over the valley. That afternoon, Amy and Sam stood by the church steps as townspeople gathered, holding handmade signs. "Keep the truck where it belongs. Let the letters speak for Miller and the lost years." Reverend Bell approached them, a hint of disbelief softening his usual composure. "In 30 years, I've seen this town divided over land, taxes, even fireworks. But I've never seen them agree on hope." Sam smiled faintly. "It was never about the truck. It's about being heard." Amy nodded. "And about what silence costs." As the crowd dispersed, a little boy approached, holding a folded note. He was about 8, freckles across his nose, wearing a jacket 2 sizes too big. "Miss Amy," he said shyly, "can you mail this for me? It's for Mr. Miller. I said thank you for finding our letters." Amy knelt, taking the note gently. "I'll make sure he gets it, sweetheart." The sun dipped low, painting the church windows gold. In that light, the town didn't look broken anymore. It looked like something mended, stitched back together by hands that had finally chosen honesty over pride. That evening, Amy received an email from the state representative's office confirming receipt of their report. The OIG had officially opened an inquiry into the missing postal route of 1989. Attached was a brief note. "Your submission prompted broader review. Expect contact soon. Thank you for your service to truth." Amy showed it to Sam. "Looks like Miller's finally being heard." Sam exhaled, the tension he'd carried for weeks easing for the first time. "Then we did our job." Buddy, resting nearby, lifted his head at the sound of Sam's voice. The dog's amber eyes reflected the lamplight, calm and loyal. Amy reached down to pat his fur. "You too, mailman," she whispered. Later that night, the church bell rang 3 times, Reverend Bell's signal for community prayer. But this time, no one prayed for miracles. They prayed in thanks for what had already arrived, and somewhere beyond the ridge, in the quiet clearing where moss covered the old postal van, a single candle flickered at its windshield, left by an unknown hand, burning steady in the dark. The morning broke crisp and bright over Silver Hollow, the kind of sunlight that made even the dust on the post office windows seem like gold. But beneath the quiet hum of the town, tension rippled. News vans idled at the edge of Main Street, reporters scribbling notes while locals peeked through curtains. For the first time in decades, Silver Hollow wasn't hiding. It was waiting. Amy Lee arrived early, her steps brisk, her face pale from a sleepless night. She wore a beige sweater rolled at the sleeves, her hair tied back hastily. Sam Walker was already there, leaning against the counter, a mug of coffee untouched in his hand. Buddy rested beside him, alert but calm, his amber eyes tracking the morning activity like a sentry. "Any word?" Amy asked, voice low. "Federal teams on their way from Charleston," Sam said. "George Talbot's leading them himself." She exhaled, half in relief, half in dread. "Then it's really happening." Outside, a familiar black sedan rolled into view. Harlan Reeves stepped out, still clinging to the authority of a badge he no longer wore. His uniform jacket was pressed but faded. his silver hair combed sharply back. His jaw was set hard, though the skin beneath his eyes sagged with the weight of sleepless defiance. Behind him followed Deputy Mark Ellison, a tall man in his late 30s with a soft southern drawl, sandy hair, and an uneasily loyal expression. Mark had grown up idolizing Harlan, once seeing him as the kind of man who held the town together. But now, doubt flickered across his face like shadowed glass. "Harlan's here," Amy murmured. Sam straightened. "Let him talk first." Harlan entered without waiting for permission. "Morning," he said sharply. "Or maybe not such a good one, considering the circus you two started." Amy met his glare coolly. "If you're here to threaten us again, save your breath. The feds will be here any minute." Harlan smirked. "You think they'll side with you? You tampered with a federal site, interfered with evidence. You've got no idea how deep this runs." Sam's tone was steady. "I know how deep graves are, Chief. I dug enough of them overseas." For a moment, the air thickened. Then the sound of approaching engines broke the silence. 3 black SUVs stopped in front of the post office. The doors opened in practice synchrony, and George Talbot stepped out first, followed by 2 agents in dark suits. He wore the same crisp uniform as before, but his eyes were harder now, carrying both exhaustion and resolve. "Chief Reeves," George said evenly, approaching. "This site is now under federal jurisdiction. Your authority here ended 30 years ago." Harlan's lips twitched. "I built this town, Talbot. You don't get to waltz in and tell me." "I don't have to," George interrupted, producing a file stamped "Confidential, Federal Investigation." Robert Miller reported fraudulent. Diversion of medical supplies tied to county contracts. Records indicate your name appeared in multiple requisition logs. Harlan froze, his eyes narrowing. "That's a lie." George continued, his tone almost pitying. "Miller never made it to the handover. Internal memos from 1989 show his last logged route carried sealed reports bound for the state office. He tried to expose the theft of medical shipments intended for veterans' clinics." Amy's face went pale. The missing supplies, like the ones Sam used to wait for overseas. Sam's hand tightened around the counter edge, memories flashing. The injured left behind because medicine never came. The silent guilt he'd carried for years without knowing why. "He was trying to save lives," he said quietly, "and someone killed him for it." George nodded grimly. "Our forensic team found signs of blunt trauma on the remains inside the van. We'll confirm through DNA, but we already know." Harlan's composure cracked. "You have no proof it was me." George held his gaze. "Maybe not you alone, but your signature's on every rerouted invoice. The investigation will determine how many hands helped you bury the truth." Outside, townspeople had begun to gather. Reverend Bell stood with Janice Porter and Martha Green among the crowd, their faces drawn but determined. The sight of the agents, the vehicles, the sealed boxes marked evidence. It all felt like judgment long deferred. Amy stepped forward. "You could have stopped this, Harlan. All those years. Why protect the lie?" Harlan's eyes gleamed with a desperate pride. "Because this town was dying. Do you know what happens when faith in its leaders collapses? I did what I had to do." Sam's voice was quiet but cutting. "You buried a man to save your image. That's not leadership. That's cowardice." For the first time, Harlan looked old, truly old. He sank into a nearby chair, the fight leaving him like air from a punctured tire. Outside, the agents began sealing evidence crates into their vehicles. By noon, word had spread. Silver Hollow gathered at the ridge to watch as federal teams lifted the rusted mail van from its resting place. The air smelled of moss and wet metal. Reporters stood at the perimeter, their cameras catching the moment the sunlight broke through the canopy, striking the vehicle's hood. The brass nameplate, R. Miller, flashed briefly, like a wink from the past. Amy stood beside Reverend Bell, who whispered, "It's not just a van anymore. It's a monument." Nearby, the governor's liaison, Clara Hensley, a sharp-featured woman in her 40s with steel-gray hair and a posture like tempered iron, addressed the press. The state of West Virginia is officially designating the Silver Hollow Post Center as a memorial archive, she announced. It will preserve the history of Postal Service members, veterans, and civilians whose duty carried both message and sacrifice. Applause broke out, soft at first, then swelling as people realized what it meant. The lost van, once hidden to protect shame, would now stand as a symbol of truth reclaimed. Sam turned to Amy, his voice low. "He didn't die forgotten after all." Amy smiled faintly. "And maybe none of us have to, if we keep listening." Buddy wagged his tail, brushing against Sam's leg. The dog's harness still bore the small pouch from weeks earlier, now holding a new letter, written by the town council and signed by hundreds. Inside, it read, "For Robert Miller. For those who carried hope, even when no one was watching." As the sun reached its peak, the van's metal shimmered under the light. It looked both ruined and reborn. Children placed wildflowers around its wheels. Veterans saluted quietly. The scene had no grandeur, only sincerity. George approached Sam and extended his hand. "For what it's worth," he said, "Miller would have been proud." Sam shook it firmly. "He just wanted the truth delivered. We were just the couriers." George smiled, the lines around his eyes softening. "Then it's delivered." The afternoon faded into a soft gold haze. Harlan was taken away without ceremony. No cuffs, no words, just silence and the whisper of pine needles above. Amy watched as he passed, then turned toward the van one last time. "Funny," she said softly, "how sunlight makes even rust look beautiful." Sam looked at her, then at Buddy, who stood watchful in the light. "That's because it's honest," he said. "Even shadows tell the truth when the sun's high enough." The wind shifted, carrying the scent of cedar and the faint chime from the church bell below the ridge. For the first time, Silver Hollow felt whole again, not because it was perfect, but because it had stopped pretending. And in that moment, under the full blaze of afternoon, the rusted van gleamed like a promise kept. The weeks that followed the federal inquiry were slow, deliberate, and strangely peaceful, like a town relearning how to breathe. The noise had faded, replaced by the rhythm of normal life, the creak of the old post office door, the smell of roasted coffee from May's diner, the low hum of a place beginning to trust silence again. Silver Hollow, for the first time in decades, was at rest. Harlan Reeves, however, was not. The once fearsome former chief had officially been removed from his consulting position on the county board. The news was printed in the West Virginia Ledger in a small column between weather reports and church notices. "Administrative retirement," it read. "Bureaucratic code for disgrace." The state had confiscated his records, and his remaining supporters had drifted quietly away. The old power that once filled his voice had dissolved into a tired rasp. Sam Walker saw him one last time at the courthouse. Harlan was sitting alone on a bench outside, his uniform jacket folded across his knees. His hair looked thinner now, his hands trembling slightly as he tried to light a cigarette. For a long moment, Sam considered walking past, but then he stopped. "Chief," he said quietly. Harlan looked up, eyes watery and red around the edges. "Walker?" His voice had lost its command. "You came to gloat?" Sam shook his head. "No, I came to make sure you're all right." Harlan gave a dry laugh. "That's rich. You win, soldier. They dug it all up. The contracts, the bribes, the shipments. You got your truth. Satisfied?" Sam's gaze was steady, unflinching. "The truth was never mine. It belonged to the people who deserved to know it." Harlan exhaled, the cigarette shaking in his fingers. "You think it changes anything?" "Maybe not the past," Sam said softly, "but it changes what comes next. He turned to leave, and behind him Harlan whispered, almost to himself, "He really did try to report it, didn't he? Miller." Sam paused but didn't look back. "He did. You still have time to do the same." Then he walked away. When Sam reached the post office that afternoon, Amy Lee was already there, arranging small display boards on the walls. The old lobby had been transformed into a modest exhibit. Photos, letters, and salvaged relics from the recovered mail van. She had titled it, "Letters That Arrived Late." The phrase, painted in warm ochre on a wooden plaque, caught the sunlight through the front window. Amy looked up from her work. "You saw him?" Sam nodded. "He's broken, not bitter. That's something." Amy sighed. "I'm not sure I could forgive like that." "It's not forgiveness," Sam replied. "It's closure." The exhibit opening was scheduled for Sunday. The whole town pitched in. Reverend Bell offered the church choir to sing hymns. The high school art class decorated the entryway with garlands of paper envelopes, and Sarah Douglas, the retired postal clerk, baked enough pies to feed half the county. Even the local mechanic, Tom Willis, a burly man with grease permanently under his nails and a voice that carried across parking lots, volunteered to build the wooden stands. "We owe that fella Miller more than we knew," he said. "Least I can do is give him a proper shelf." On the morning of the event, the town square bloomed with color. Banners hung from the lampposts, and the post office doors stood wide open. Amy, wearing a navy dress and a small silver brooch shaped like a quill, greeted visitors at the entrance. Buddy, freshly brushed and wearing his harness with the little mail pouch, stood beside Sam, tail wagging like a metronome of joy. Inside, the display cases glimmered under soft light. The recovered letters were arranged chronologically, each accompanied by a small note explaining its origin and destination. Some were addressed to people who still lived in Silver Hollow. Others were memorialized to those who had passed. Amy had added one small section near the end, a tribute to Robert Miller. His tarnished nameplate and old postal key were placed together on a velvet cushion, beside a framed copy of the burned note that started it all. "If anyone reads this, don't let them bury the truth with me." Visitors moved slowly through the room, whispering, pointing, and occasionally wiping tears. Reverend Bell spoke briefly, his voice warm and firm. "We built walls to forget," he said, "but truth has a strange way of knocking until you open the door." A few reporters attended, their cameras respectful and subdued. One of them, Elena Ruiz, a young Latina journalist with cropped dark hair and bright, curious eyes, approached Amy for an interview. "This story's everywhere now," she said, smiling. "But the heart of it, this community, it's something we don't see often anymore." Amy nodded. It wasn't just one person. It was everyone choosing to remember together. Outside, Buddy became the star of the afternoon. Children lined up to mail letters into the small pouch he carried. Each note was symbolic, a message of gratitude, remembrance, or forgiveness. "He's like a walking time capsule," Amy joked, as Buddy trotted around, proudly delivering the letters to the front desk where Sam collected them. An elderly man, Henry Caldwell, approached Sam with a cane and a folded letter. He was tall, though slightly bent with age, his white hair combed neatly back and his suit pressed despite the summer heat. His hands shook as he offered the envelope. "This one's for Miller," he said softly. "I was his supervisor. I didn't believe him back then. Guess I'm trying to make that right." Sam took the letter gently, nodding. "He'd forgive you," he said. "You're delivering it now." Henry smiled faintly. "Better late than never, huh?" When the choir began to sing Amazing Grace, the sunlight broke through the post office window and poured across the letters, scattering across the glass cases like molten gold. Sam felt something shift inside him. Not triumph, not relief, but peace. He looked over at Amy, who was standing near the front with tears glimmering in her eyes. Buddy lay at her feet, content, his head resting on his paws. Later, as the crowd thinned, Amy joined Sam by the door. "You know," she said, "I think this is what he wanted. Not fame, not revenge, just remembrance." Sam nodded slowly. Truth doesn't need noise, just witnesses. That evening, after the guests had gone, Sam sat outside with Buddy, watching the sun sink behind the hills. The van gleamed faintly in the distance where it had been preserved, a small plaque newly placed before it, dedicated to Robert Miller and all who carried messages of hope. Amy stepped outside, carrying 2 cups of coffee. She handed one to Sam and smiled. "We did good work." He looked at her, the golden light catching her face. "No," he said quietly. "The town did. We just delivered the mail." Buddy stretched, tail thumping lightly against the porch. A soft breeze stirred the flags along Main Street, making them ripple like waves. Silver Hollow, once scarred by silence, now moved to the gentle rhythm of letters being sent, read, and remembered. And for the first time in years, it felt like every word had finally found its way home. It was late spring when the first light touched the valley again. The frost had melted from the hills, and the air carried the scent of lilac and pine. The old postal van stood at the edge of the square, newly restored, yet still marked by the years that had buried it. The townsfolk had chosen not to paint over the last patch of moss along its side, a single green scar that shimmered faintly in the morning sun. Amy Lee called it the beautiful wound of time. Sam Walker stood a few steps away, his beige shirt sleeves rolled up, his posture calm but proud. The sunlight caught the lines on his face, softening them. Buddy sat beside him, older now, fur glinting gold where it caught the light. His tail thumped gently against the ground, as if keeping time with the church bell that was about to ring. The ceremony was small but meaningful. The town had gathered in front of the Silver Hollow Post Center, now bearing a bronze plaque that read, "In honor of Robert Miller and those who carried the unspoken." Reverend Bell led a short prayer, his voice rising with the birds. Nearby, children from the elementary school held handmade flags, each painted with a letter flying toward a bright sky. Amy stepped to the microphone, the morning light falling across her face. "This van," she said softly, "was once hidden to bury shame. Now it stands as proof that truth can outlive silence. Silver Hollow didn't just find letters, it found its voice again." Applause followed, gentle at first, then growing. Sam caught Amy's eye, and for a moment they shared a quiet smile, the kind that comes from walking through storms together and finally seeing blue sky. When the speeches ended, the ribbon was cut, and people began exploring the newly refurbished exhibit. Inside, photos lined the walls, snapshots of the excavation, of the first reading at the church, of children posting their messages into Buddy's pouch. The air smelled faintly of cedar and fresh paint. At the center stood the restored van, gleaming under a skylight. It was open for visitors to walk through. The old postal seats had been preserved, the floor reinforced, and the shelves filled with reproductions of the recovered mail. A small plaque hung inside. Letters that arrived late, a memorial to faith, duty, and connection. Nearby, Amy showed Sam a new edition, a framed certificate signed by the state governor. "They approved the foundation," she said, eyes bright. "Letters of hope. It's official." Sam ran his fingers over the embossed seal. "You did it." Amy shook her head. "We did it. And this time, the mail won't go missing." The Letters of Hope Foundation would help veterans and families write, share, and heal through letters. Partnering with local hospitals and veteran homes, it would send volunteers to help those who'd lost their words find them again. Buddy, with his calm eyes and gentle patience, had already become the foundation's mascot. Every Tuesday, he visited the Pinecrest Veterans Home with Amy, carrying small envelopes filled with handwritten messages, notes of gratitude, hope, or simple companionship. One of the residents, Earl Jennings, a thin man in his late 70s with a shock of white hair and a laugh like dry leaves, had once said, "That dog delivers better medicine than any doctor." When Buddy trotted in, the hall always brightened. The nurses swore even the grumpiest veterans smiled when they saw his wagging tail. Later that month, a letter arrived addressed to Mr. Sam Walker, Silver Hollow Post Center. It came in a thick envelope with the state seal. Amy handed it to him over coffee one morning. "Looks important," she teased. Sam opened it carefully. Inside was a formal citation for service to community, integrity, and the restoration of civic trust. Samuel Walker is hereby recognized as Honorary Director of the Silver Hollow Postal Heritage Center. Attached was a small voucher from the state's Community Grant Fund, a symbolic but heartfelt amount earmarked to restore the rural mail routes once lost. Sam looked up, startled. "Honorary Director?" Amy grinned. "You're the face of the center now, Mr. Walker. Better get used to shaking hands and cutting ribbons." He laughed quietly. "Guess I traded a battlefield for a mailbox." She reached across the table, tapping the letter. "No, you traded silence for something worth delivering." The summer passed gently. The hills turned green again, and Silver Hollow grew into the kind of town that made people linger longer at the diner, talk slower on porches, and wave to each other at stoplights. The wounds of the past had not vanished. They had simply healed into reminders. On one particularly golden evening, the Post Center hosted an anniversary event for the foundation. Veterans from nearby counties attended. Families brought pies, and children read short letters of hope aloud. One girl, no more than 10, stood shyly at the front and read, "Dear Mr. Miller, thank you for being brave enough to tell the truth, even when no one listened. Because of you, my grandpa got to tell his story too." The audience fell silent, then applauded softly. Sam felt his throat tighten. He turned to Buddy, who sat alert beside the stage, wearing his small blue vest embroidered with letters of hope. The dog tilted his head, sensing the emotion, but content to stay still. After the event, the crowd drifted home under the starlit sky. Sam lingered behind, walking toward the restored van. The night air was cool, the kind that carried the faint scent of wood smoke and wild grass. Buddy followed, his paws making soft sounds on the gravel. Sam sat down on the bench beside the van. The metal gleamed faintly under the lamplight, the patch of moss glowing a soft emerald. Buddy laid his head on Sam's knee, sighing deeply. "You know," Sam said quietly, running a hand through the dog's fur, "there are letters that spend their whole lives trying to find their way." He paused, looking up at the faint outline of stars above the valley. But somehow, they always reach the right person in the end. Buddy's tail wagged once, slow and content. As the first blush of dawn crept over the ridge, light spilled down the slopes, catching the van's windshield and scattering into hundreds of tiny reflections across the square. Amy stepped out of the post office, coffee in hand, watching as Sam and Buddy sat bathed in the morning glow. For a moment, everything was still, the van, the valley, the people. And in that stillness, Silver Hollow seemed to breathe as one. The letters had come home. The truth had found its voice. And the day, like every good message, began exactly where it was meant to. And so, the story of Silver Hollow became more than a tale of letters and lost time. It became a quiet testament to what people can rebuild when they choose truth over fear, compassion over silence. The van, the letters, and the faithful dog were not miracles by chance, but by grace, the kind that God weaves through ordinary hands and humble hearts. In every town, in every home, there are still letters waiting to be delivered. Words of forgiveness, gratitude, or love we've been too afraid to send. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs hope today. Leave a comment below with where you're watching from. Your story matters too. Don't forget to subscribe for more true, heart-healing stories of faith, courage, and second chances. May God bless you and your loved ones with peace, strength, and the quiet miracle of a new beginning.